Today we're talking about altitude, what it is, how it affects you, and how you can prepare. While we chat, we're going to climb Uray's iconic Mount Abram and follow its ridge well above tree line all day to a couple of other peaks. Let's go! I'm Sarah. I live in the mountains, and I'm just trying to be happier, healthier, stronger every day. Altitude is how high you are above sea level. The higher you climb, the thinner the air gets. And it's not that there's less oxygen floating around up high. The percentage of oxygen in the air is the same. What's changing is air pressure. And because of the lower air pressure, each breath, you're bringing in fewer oxygen molecules. This air pressure situation is going to affect your life in a lot of ways, but there's also a lot that you can do to prepare, to plan, and to take care of yourself while you're at altitude to maximize your chances of thriving while you're up here. So let's talk about what is actually happening in your body when you are at altitude. As soon as you arrive at a higher altitude than you're used to, within minutes, but this will go on for days, your breathing speeds up, your heart pumps harder, and your body shifts fluids so your red blood cells are more concentrated. This is why your efforts will feel harder. In the medium term, so days to a couple weeks, your kidneys release EPO, which kicks off an increase in red blood cell production. So EPO is famous from that whole Tour de France blood doping scandal. Some people are naturally deficient in EPO, which you can imagine would be problematic. So the medical system makes synthetic EPO. And of course, someone figured out that healthy people could improve their performance by manipulating this, and that is blood doping. But your body will produce EPO naturally, some amount of it, and create more red blood cells for you. Hemoglobin also adjusts, so it unloads oxygen more easily to your muscles. These processes are also the bulk of the benefits of training at altitude, like how people do training camps up high sometimes. After a couple weeks, you'll be mostly acclimated, and to finish acclimatization, you can expect the rest to take several months. In the longer term, weeks to months, your body fine-tunes. Even more red blood cells, better mitochondrial efficiency, extra capillaries in your muscles for better oxygen delivery. And just like training, your body needs consistent altitude stimulus to trigger and maintain these changes. You'll start the process as soon as you're at altitude, and as soon as you go back down, you will start to lose your adaptations. And also, just like training, your body does give you roughly 2 weeks or a few weeks before it really engages the systems to start removing your adaptations. People who are born at altitude have better, more efficient systems for this. When I lived in Leadville, it was common that if an older person who wasn't born in Leadville had an accident or a bad illness, they would have to be shipped down to the Front Range to recover. I was born at sea level, and I've noticed that when I go back down to sea level, my recovery numbers are so much better immediately. My heart rate variability skyrockets, my resting heart rate lowers. My fiance was born in Denver, and when he goes to sea level, he doesn't see huge improvements in recovery. And when we return to Uray after being away, his body also doesn't struggle nearly as much as mine does to reacclimate, which my sleep and recovery the first few nights being back home at altitude is always complete garbage. Looks like I'm super sick or something. So what are the things that you need to worry about altitude? The thin air has more consequences for us besides just performance and stress on your system. For every 1,000 feet of altitude, 4% more UV comes through, which means you need to wear sun protection. It's actually really serious. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it means that if you're at 10,000 feet, like the starting line of Leadville, there's 40% more UV than at sea level. And at 14,000 feet, like the summit of Albert, that's 56% more UV. Snow also reflects UV back at you, so if it wasn't enough to worry about the sun directly, you now have to worry about the reflection of the sun. You also need to stay especially hydrated. Hydration is always important, but at altitude you'll be breathing faster and the air is drier, so you'll lose water with every exhale. On top of that, your blood plasma drops as part of adaptations. If you don't hydrate, your blood can get too thick, which makes headaches, fatigue, and altitude illness all worse. There's also temperature. Every 1,000 feet is about 5 degrees colder. That's an average. It's probably more like 3.5 to 6 degrees. So if you're climbing a 14er, you can expect the summit to be 20 degrees colder than the trailhead. And if you're running an ultra, you can expect temperature swings on every climb of probably 10 to 20 degrees. So you just want to be really mindful of your layers and not getting too sweaty on descents or early on ascents when you're still low, so you'll be too cold up high. Also be super aware of being out in the dark. The sun can trick you by feeling much warmer than the air temperature actually is, and then once it's gone, thin air at altitude doesn't hold heat in. It gets cold really fast. Anytime you're at a higher altitude than you train at, your pacing is not going to translate. You're also not going to sleep well at altitude, especially the first few nights, but also the first few weeks. You won't recover as well. Altitude is a huge stressor to everyone all of the time, but it's an even bigger stressor when you're new to altitude or when you haven't acclimated yet. Some people will have cognitive side effects at altitude, like you might feel less coordinated and clumsy. You might have poor decision making. There's also the possibility of altitude sickness, and worse, of course, like HAPE and HACE, the high altitude edemas. Altitude will suppress your appetite, which is a struggle because you really need to eat more for more energy, especially carbs burn really well up high. And of course, we already know carbs absorb better than the other macros when you're efforting anyway, so that's kind of perfect. And here's some miscellaneous stuff. If you get sick, it will hit you harder. If you get cuts, they will heal slower. And random stuff can happen, like when I moved to Leadville, my nose bled every day for a month. There's also the whole storms thing. They're way more volatile, but that's really just a mountain thing in general and not super specific to altitude. Okay, so we know how altitude works and what its impact can be on us. So what can you do? I'm going to talk about acclimatization last because that's going to take the longest. So first, be really well trained. The absolute best thing you can do to set yourself up for success at altitude is to be super fit. Nothing can make you immune to hypoxia, but the stronger your cardiovascular and muscular foundation is, the better your body can buffer the hit. Also, your VO2 max is going to drop at altitude, but whatever it was to start with matters. So the higher it is going into this, the better off you're going to be. It helps if your body is already efficient with oxygen. This is why I have a lot of my runners do speed work, even when they're not working on speed or they're maybe working on longer races, just to make sure that their systems are really efficient. You should be really well hydrated all of the time, even in the weeks before the event. Just don't let your body have the stress of being dehydrated. Just show up to altitude hydrated and be well fed and well rested. Also, make sure your iron isn't low. That's a bigger struggle for women in general, but the process of training tends to increase your iron turnover, so it can be an issue for runners, male or female. And of course, iron is a limiting factor in acclimatization, so that's why it could be problematic if you came to altitude anemic. There's some evidence that heat training could help your performance at altitude. It does not seem like a direct correlation, but there is crossover with plasma volume and, of course, stress tolerance in general. There's also some evidence that breath work could improve oxygen system efficiency. It is wildly complicated, so I'm not going to go deeply into it, but any type of breath work in general, or specifically if you train while breathing in and out through your nose, you could give yourself a small advantage. And absolutely do not show up to altitude stressed, tired, or sick. I cannot emphasize that enough. You don't want to be on a start line stressed, tired, or sick to begin with, but it will sabotage your event. So make sure that you've got those on lock, because if you do everything else right, but then your body is so stressed it's crippling, then it's still going to sabotage you in the last minute. Okay, Okay, acclimatization. You've probably heard this advice before. Either race the morning of arrival or come up 10 to 14 days before. If you arrive race morning, your body has not started acclimating yet. You'll still breathe harder and slow down when you start, but you dodge the messy adjustment phase. Obviously, this is really hard to execute, but the main thing is to try to sleep as low as you can the night before. If you came 2 to 5 days early, which is very tempting, that sounds like a normal thing to do, but that's the worst possible time you could set your body up for the acclimatization process and then a big effort. Your body is going to kick off acclimatization and adaptations. And the first few days of that, there will be so much stress on your body that it's basically like being sick and run down. You're going to sleep horribly those few nights, and then you're going to be starting your race or ascent at your absolute lowest point. If you came up 10 to 14 days early, ease in, go through the first bad days and rest, do your taper up high. The worst part will be over. The good stuff has started to come to fruition, and you'll have more red blood cells. Your increased breathing will have stabilized. You'll be sleeping somewhat normally. You're not going to be equal to locals, but you'll be through the slump and mitigating your performance drops somewhat. Okay, let's talk about people who have different goals. For runners doing races in the mountains, arrive either race morning or 10 to 14 days early and then ease in. Pace by effort and be careful not to overdo it either before or during your event. Hydrate well. Fuel with carbs. Be careful about sun and temperatures. One kind of built-in way to handle the transition to altitude from lower is that a lot of the big cities in places like Colorado and California are at a lower altitude anyway, like Denver. So wherever you're flying in might be at a medium altitude, and you can spend a few days sleeping there and driving up higher during the day before you commit to going all the way up to, say, Leadville or Silverton, etc. Just like training, ease your body in, but give it consistent exposure. And then taking really good care of your body and your health during will yield the best results for acclimatization. For mountain residents who already live up high, maybe 6,000 or 7,000 feet or higher, somewhere between weekly and daily exposure at a higher altitude will maintain your adaptations. But that's also a lot of stress on your body. So if there's not a reason to intentionally maintain, you don't need to keep this up all of the time year round. If you let it lapse in an off season, say over the winter, you can easily build it back up again in the month or couple months before you have a race or an effort coming. So I wouldn't focus on maintaining your high altitude acclimatization when you're working on something else, like when you're just setting up your base. A lot of us go for projects or races that involve being above tree line for an extended period of time, maybe multiple days. One trick to acclimating to that height is to sleep up high for a couple nights in the 1 to 2 weeks before your event. If you do it, just make sure that you're sleeping lower in the 2 to 4 nights before, so you can make sure that you're getting good sleep right before the event. And for folks who are trying to go up really high, there's 2 schools of thought on the progression here. There's alpine style, where you're going to try to get up high as fast as you can, basically trying to get in and out before your body really kicks off the acclimatization process. And then there's expedition style, where you're going a bit higher each day and sleeping lower to try to trigger acclimatization and ultimately try to summit once your body has made it through that initial couple of weeks threshold where you would be mostly acclimated. So ultimately, altitude is a huge stressor. Don't underestimate it. Your body can adjust, but it takes time. How you prepare ahead of time, how you plan your arrival and your acclimatization, and how you care for yourself once you're up here can be the difference between suffering through your event or thriving up high. I hope you guys found this useful. Thanks so much for coming along, and I hope to see you in the next one.